The chandeliers in the Lusaka Hotel ballroom threw soft golden light over the polished floors, making the whole place shimmer like a scene from a magazine. Lindiwe stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived, her diamond earrings catching the light every time she turned her head. The air was warm with the smell of fresh roses and the rich aroma of the buffet waiting at the back of the room. Waiters in crisp white shirts moved like clockwork, carrying trays of champagne. A jazz band played in the corner, the mellow notes blending with bursts of laughter from well-dressed men and women. Thabiso's friends slapped him on the back, telling stories, the kind that make people roar with laughter. His mother, regal in a silk wrapper, sat chatting with family friends. On the surface, it was the perfect birthday celebration. A husband loved, a wife admired, and a room filled with people who envied their life. But Lindiwe's smile never reached her eyes. While she laughed at jokes and offered warm hugs, her gaze swept the room again and again, as if she were looking for someone. Inside, her chest felt tight. Every detail, the sparkling wine, the music, the towering cake, was part of a performance she had rehearsed in her head for weeks. The guests thought they were here for a party. Lindiwe knew they were here for something else. Underneath the glamour, she carried a quiet, dangerous anticipation. Tonight wasn't just a celebration. It was the night the truth would step into the light. 3 months before the party, everything looked normal on the outside. But Lindiwe's heart started to pull in a different direction the day she found the lipstick stain on Thabiso's white shirt. It was faint, just a smudge near the collar, but clear enough to make her stomach twist. She remembered how he always wore crisp, clean clothes. This was something new, something that didn't belong. When she asked him about it, Thabiso just smiled and said it must be from a client, nothing to worry about. He brushed it off like it was no big deal. But that smile didn't reach his eyes, and Lindiwe felt a cold knot tighten inside her. She tried to believe him. She wanted to believe him, but the late nights started piling up. He was suddenly busy with work more than ever before, leaving the house long after dinner, phone glued to his ear, whispering conversations that stopped the moment she came near. One evening, she waited until he left the room and caught a faint scent lingering in the air, something sweet and unfamiliar, a perfume she didn't own or recognize. Her breath hitched. It was the kind of smell that clings to skin, and she knew it wasn't from. The doubt, which had been whispering quietly before, became a shout in her mind. She tried to ask him again, gently this time, but Thabiso grew defensive, angry even, accusing her of imagining things. His denial was sharp, but it didn't erase the growing ache in Lindiwe's chest. She felt trapped between wanting to trust him and knowing something was deeply wrong. Every phone call that ended abruptly when she walked in, every late night he couldn't explain, chipped away at the world they built together. The lipstick stain was only the first sign, but it opened a door she wished had stayed closed. Lindiwe couldn't ignore it anymore. She needed answers, no matter the cost. Lindiwe didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the signs were too strong to ignore. She needed proof, something real that she couldn't deny. Quietly, she reached out to Bulelwa, her childhood friend who had become a sharp and fearless journalist. Bulelwa didn't ask questions. She just listened, her voice calm but steady, promising to help. They started small. Bulelwa watched Thabiso's public events and business meeting, tracking his schedule. But the real break came when they noticed him making regular trips to a luxury lodge just outside Lusaka. It wasn't a place for business, not with the way he behaved there, always looking around nervously, never staying long, but visiting often enough to raise suspicion. Bulelwa and Lindiwe decided to go together, but kept their distance. From a hidden spot near the lodge, they watched as Thabiso arrived one evening, dressed casually but clearly trying to stay low-key. A few minutes later, a woman appeared at the gate. She was younger than Lindiwe, dressed in bright colors, with an easy confidence that made her stand out in the quiet setting. Lindiwe's heart sank as she saw them greet each other. There was no mistaking the way Thabiso smiled at her, the touch on her arm, the closeness they shared. This was Naledi, a name Lindiwe had heard whispered in town before, a woman from a rival family, known for stirring trouble in the past. Watching them from afar, Lindiwe felt a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. She thought she knew everything about her husband, but here was a secret life she never imagined. Bulelwa captured a few discreet photos and videos, careful not to be seen. That night, Lindiwe couldn't sleep. The images kept playing in her mind, and a quiet voice inside told her this was just the beginning. She realized that the truth was more painful than she had expected. But now she had the proof, and with proof came power. Lindiwe's mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? What else was hidden beneath Thabiso's polished surface? She felt a cold resolve settling in, a determination that this betrayal wouldn't go unanswered. The investigation wasn't just about catching Thabiso in the act. It was about taking back control, about standing strong in a world that suddenly seemed full of lies. With Bulelwa by her side, Lindiwe knew she was no longer alone. Together, they had uncovered a secret. Now, it was time to decide what to do with it. A few days after the stakeout at the lodge, Lindiwe's phone buzzed with a message from Bulelwa. Her heart jumped. She knew this could be the moment everything changed. Bulelwa had sent her hidden camera footage from the lodge, something she captured without anyone noticing. Lindiwe pressed play, hands trembling slightly as the video started. The scene was quiet at first, Thabiso and Naledi sitting close together, glasses of champagne catching the soft light. They laughed, leaning in like no one else was around. Then the words hit her like a punch. Thabiso, with a smile that twisted Lindiwe's insides, called Naledi my future wife. Her breath caught. She watched it again, disbelief mixing with a hollow ache that spread through her chest. It wasn't just the words. It was how easily he said it, as if their secret world was real, and she was nothing more than a shadow on the edge. Lindiwe's hands shook, but the shaking wasn't from anger. It was something colder, sharper. The kind of feeling that cuts through pain and leaves behind a clear, focused determination. She sat back, blinking away tears that didn't come. Rage might have been expected here, but instead, a quiet voice inside told her this wasn't the time for shouting or breaking. This was the moment to be smart, to plan, to make sure that when the truth came out, it would hit harder than anything else. Lindiwe thought about how she wanted the confrontation to feel, not like a messy fight, but like a moment no one could forget. She wanted it to be clear to everyone in the room that the life Thabiso showed the world was a lie, that the man who called her wife was the same man promising forever to someone else. She imagined the faces of the guests, their shock, their whispers. She wanted to hold the power, to take back what had been stolen. The footage was more than proof. It was her weapon. Lindiwe knew the coming days would be difficult. There would be questions, accusations, maybe even threats. But she felt ready, stronger than before, sharper than she thought possible. The truth was out there now, and it was time for it to step into the light where no one could hide from. The perfect moment was coming, and Lindiwe was going to make sure the world saw everything on her terms. Lindiwe spent the days before the party planning every little detail with quiet determination. This wasn't just any celebration. It was the stage for something much bigger. She knew exactly how she wanted things to unfold, and she wasn't leaving anything to chance. First, the seating. Lindiwe made sure Thabiso would be surrounded by family and close friends, people who admired him and trusted him. She arranged the seats so Naledi would be placed right where everyone could see her, in the front row, a spotlight she didn't deserve but would get anyway. Lindiwe's smile when she imagined Naledi sitting there was small but fierce. The cake was another piece of the plan. It was huge, beautifully decorated with gold and white icing, Thabiso's name in bold letters on top. Lindiwe insisted on cutting the cake herself. That moment, she knew, would be watched closely by every guest. It was her chance to show she was still in control. Then there was the speech. Lindiwe told the event planner she wanted to speak before the final toast. It was an unusual request, but no one questioned it. After all, she was the wife, the one throwing the party. What better way to get everyone's attention than with a few well-chosen words? The boldest move was the invitation to Naledi. Lindiwe sent it privately, carefully wording it to sound like Thabiso himself wanted her there. She made sure it reached Naledi's hands with no one else knowing. The invitation was the final piece that turned the party from a celebration into a trap. Every detail was meant to catch Thabiso off guard, to make the secret he thought was safe impossible to hide. Lindiwe's mind worked like clockwork, her plans precise and sharp. This was about more than revenge. It was about taking back her dignity in front of everyone who mattered. As the day of the party came closer, Lindiwe felt a strange mix of nerves and calm. She practiced her smile in the mirror, the one she would wear all night. It hid the storm inside, the anger and hurt that only she knew about. She wasn't just preparing a party. She was preparing for the moment when the truth would break open the polished surface of their perfect life. And when it did, no one would be able to turn away. The party was in full swing. Music filled the air, laughter bounced off the walls, and glasses clinked as people toasted to Thabiso's success and good health. Lindiwe moved through the crowd with practiced ease, greeting guests and laughing politely. But inside, she was waiting for one moment, the moment that would change everything. Then the doors opened. All chatter slowed as Naledi stepped inside. She was wearing a striking red dress, bold and impossible to ignore. The color clashed with the elegant gold and white decorations, but she didn't care. She walked in like she owned the place, confidence clear in every step. Whispers started almost immediately, rippling through the crowd like a sudden wave. Eyes darted between Naledi and Thabiso. Some guests leaned in to whisper, their voices low but charged with curiosity and surprise. Everyone knew who she was, even if no one wanted to say it out loud. Thabiso froze mid-sentence. The smile he had worn moments before vanished, replaced by a look of shock and panic. His eyes locked onto Naledi, wide and unblinking. It was like time stopped for him, the carefully built mask cracking in front of everyone. Lindiwe caught his gaze, her smile steady and calm. She didn't flinch or waver. Instead, she moved smoothly toward Naledi and gestured toward the front row, inviting her to sit down. It was a silent message to the room. This was no accident. Naledi hesitated for a second, her eyes flickering between Lindiwe and the watching guests. But she accepted the seat, sliding into it with a forced calm that didn't fool anyone. The crowd's whispers grew louder, mixing with gasps and exchanged glances. Lindiwe's heart beat steadily, even as a rush of emotions surged beneath the surface. She felt a strange power in that moment, standing there with the woman her husband had hidden, both of them forced into the same room. The guests were caught between disbelief and fascination. Some stared openly, others tried to pretend they hadn't noticed. But the tension was impossible to miss. The perfect party had shattered in an instant, replaced by a charged silence filled with questions no one dared to speak aloud yet. Lindiwe stayed poised, her eyes never leaving Thabiso's face. She could see the confusion, the fear, and maybe even regret hidden in his glance. But she also knew this was just the beginning. As the music started up again, quieter now, and the chatter hesitated, Lindiwe felt the weight of what was coming. This night wasn't just a celebration anymore. It was a reckoning, and everyone in the room was about to witness it. The room quieted as Lindiwe stepped up to the microphone. The music faded, and all eyes turned to her. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. For a brief second, she looked like the perfect wife, graceful, composed. She began with gentle words, speaking about loyalty, trust, and the promises made in marriage. Her voice was soft but clear, carrying across the room like a calm before the storm. She talked about how marriage is built on respect and honesty, about the pain betrayal causes not just to one person, but to everyone who believes in that bond. Guests listened, some nodding, others watching her with curiosity. Thabiso sat frozen, eyes fixed on her, his face pale. Naledi's cheeks flushed, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Then, without warning, Lindiwe clicked the remote. The large screen behind her flickered to life. The hidden camera footage Bulelwa had captured played out in front of everyone. There was Thabiso, smiling and relaxed, clinking glasses with Naledi. He called her my future wife, the words ringing loud and clear in the silent room. The laughter, the closeness, the casual betrayal. It all played out like a cruel movie no one wanted to watch but couldn't look away from. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Some people whispered angrily, others shouted in disbelief. A glass slipped from someone's hand, shattering on the floor with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the room. Thabiso's face drained of color. He tried to speak, to explain, but no one gave him the chance. The shock was too fresh, the betrayal too raw. Guests exchanged stunned looks, some shaking their heads, others murmuring quietly. Lindiwe stood tall, her voice steady as she said, "This is the truth hidden behind the smiles and celebrations." She let the silence grow heavy, letting the weight of her words sink in. The room was no longer filled with joy or laughter. It was thick with tension, hurt, and confusion. Lindiwe felt a strange relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. She had waited so long to show this moment to the world, and now it was here, impossible to ignore. Looking around, she saw the shock in her friend's eyes, the disappointment in Thabiso's family, and the anger in Naledi's stance. But beneath it all was a clear message. The perfect life they thought they knew was nothing but a carefully built lie. Lindiwe's heart ached, but she didn't falter. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. And tonight, that truth was louder than any celebration. As the footage ended, a heavy silence fell over the room. Thabiso stood up, his face pale and strained. He opened his mouth to speak, trying to explain, to deny, to make excuses, but his voice sounded weak and unsure. The confident man everyone admired was gone, replaced by someone desperate to save a crumbling image. "Please let me explain," he said, but the words felt hollow even to his own ear. The guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to believe him or let the moment sink in. Across the room, Thabiso's parents exchanged a glance filled with disappointment. Slowly, his mother turned away, her eyes refusing to meet his. His father stood silently, head bowed, the weight of shame heavy on his shoulders. They had raised him with pride, but now, their son was exposed in the worst possible way. The business partners, who had been chatting nearby moments before, began to quietly gather their things. One by one, they slipped out the back doors, careful not to draw attention. Deals that once seemed solid suddenly felt shaky, as if the trust they had in Thabiso was breaking apart with every passing second. Naledi's reaction was swift and fierce. She stood abruptly, her red dress flowing as she pushed through the crowd. Her face burned with humiliation, but there was also anger, at Lindiwe, at Thabiso, at the world that had just turned against her. Without a word, she stormed out, leaving a trail of whispers and stares behind her. Meanwhile, the guests pulled out their phones, capturing every moment. The stunned faces, the broken conversations, the shattered illusion. Cameras flashed, videos were shared, and the scene unfolded live on social media. Within minutes, hashtags related to the birthday betrayal began trending across platforms. Lindiwe watched quietly, feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The man she once loved was unraveling before her eyes, stripped of his pride and secrets. The crowd's shock was palpable, and the power of the moment was undeniable. Some guests approached Lindiwe with hesitant sympathy. Others avoided her gaze altogether. The night had shifted from celebration to chaos, and there was no going back. Thabiso tried to salvage what he could, but the damage was done. His voice cracked as he attempted one last time to justify himself, but no one was listening. The silence from those who mattered, the family, the friends, the business circle, was louder than any defense he could offer. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Lindiwe felt a calm settle over her. The truth had come out, painfully and publicly. The man who betrayed her was no longer untouchable, and though the road ahead was uncertain, she knew this moment was the beginning of her freedom. The morning after the party, Lusaka woke up to the news everyone was talking about, the birthday betrayal. Stories spread quickly, fueled by the videos and pictures shared all over social media. People who had once admired Thabiso now whispered about his fall from grace. In the offices of his business partners, the mood was grim. Calls were made, meetings canceled. Deals that seemed certain just days before were now on hold or completely dropped. Trust, once built carefully over years, had shattered overnight. Clients didn't want to be connected to scandal, and Thabiso's reputation was crumbling fast. Meanwhile, Lindiwe was already taking steps to protect herself. She met with her lawyer, calm but firm, ready to file for divorce. She had gathered all the evidence, photos, videos, messages, that proved Thabiso's betrayal beyond any doubt. This wasn't just about ending a marriage, it was about making sure she wasn't left powerless. Lindiwe's mind was clear. The pain from the betrayal was still there, but now it was mixed with a growing sense of control. She wasn't going to be the woman who silently suffered. She was taking her life back on her own terms. Friends reached out with support, offering kind words and quiet strength. Lindiwe felt the weight of those messages, reminders that she wasn't alone. Lusaka's streets buzzed with gossip, but she refused to be swallowed by it. Instead, she focused on the future she wanted to build. Thabiso, meanwhile, kept a low profile. His attempts to repair his image were met with skepticism, and many doors that had once been open now closed in his face. The man who had once been the center of attention was becoming a cautionary tale. Lindiwe thought back to the moment she first suspected something was wrong. The lipstick stain, the late-night calls, the perfume she didn't recognize. It had been painful then, but now it felt like a distant memory compared to the clarity she had found. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be battles, legal and personal. But Lindiwe felt ready, stronger, freed from the lies that had held her back. The birthday betrayal was no longer just a scandal. It was the turning point in her life. And Lindiwe was determined to make sure it led her to something better, freedom, peace, and a future built on truth. 1 month later, Lindiwe found herself sitting in the same hotel where she had first smelled the perfume that didn't belong to her. But this time, the room felt different. It wasn't filled with suspicion or hurt. It was alive with laughter and celebration. Around her, friends gathered, their smiles genuine and warm. They toasted to something new, something Lindiwe had worked hard to build. Her own business, a fresh start on her own terms. The nerves she felt were different now, excitement mixed with pride. Lindiwe lifted her glass, the soft light catching the sparkle of the champagne inside. She wasn't raising it in anger or bitterness. Instead, it was a toast to freedom, to strength, and to moving forward. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain, the betrayal, the late nights spent wondering what to do next. None of it had been easy, but it had all led to this moment. Looking around at her friends, Lindiwe felt a calm confidence she hadn't known in a long time. She was no longer defined by someone else's mistakes. She was her own person, standing tall and ready for whatever came next. The music played softly in the background, but this time it was a celebration of her life, not a mask for secret. Lindiwe smiled, knowing she had taken back control and built something real. Her past was behind her now, and the future was wide open. She was free, stronger than ever.